Cool. So I'll share, I'll kind of share some slides and talk about today's Coffee for Life case study. Just a quick case study. Somebody came on, somebody called Thursday or Friday, a book buyer and said, hey, what would you do about this? And I said, I would do this. I just kind of said, hey, here's a Zoom link. Sometimes I do that. If you ever have questions, just ask me. I might just send you a Zoom link. So I would do this. Hope that's helpful. And then they followed up again. And it was actually their business partner who said, hey, how can we just get you to hold our hands through this? And it was super clear to me. But where they're at is revenue is super, super low. Huge audience, super low revenue. I basically said, hey, give me $5,000. And if for the next 30 days we don't make it back, I'll just give you your money back. It was clear to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the process, what was clear, what we did, and how I use what we call the profit flywheel, which would be cash flow engineering, revenue multiplication, customers for life. Why it was so clear, how it crystallizes in what we did yesterday alone. So I have 30 days to make 16 sales. That's basically what it comes down to in order to not have to refund them. Yesterday, within 2 hours, made 91 sales. And as of this morning, it's in the 110s, 115s. And we haven't made a sales push yet. That'll be Thursday through Sunday. And so if you're interested, you drop in the comments, let me know. I can kind of walk you through the frameworks, how we came to this strategy, because it is probably not what most people in here would do. And I wanted to do it here because a lot of the framework is it's super aligned with what Dan is doing. Difference being the nature of the offer and the audience. Cool. So overview for everybody watching. Sometimes Mondays, always Fridays, we talk about what is the profit flywheel. And the big assumption we are always making is that everything we do, and this is really, really important for the case study I'm about to share, because if you saw the assets this person was working with, you'd have a million ideas and a million ways to make money. And I'd slap you in the face if you suggested them, because most of them are not aligned with what this person actually wants. So this is really, really important that every step needs to get closer to the things that actually matter to you. We fall into the trap of saying, oh, we'd make so much money if we did this. Oftentimes doing this is not getting closer to the thing. It could be getting further away. So that's the assumption we're making every single time you see me or Dan talk about something. We're assuming that you're trying to figure out, should you do a thing? What thing should you do? And that the long-term goal here, look at these slides going crazy. Long-term goal is to get you
warnings, about how there's going to be strobe lights. Like if you have sensitivity to strobe lights or something, beware.
Like if you have epilepsy, don't come to Flywheel Friday.
Because Nick's going to jump through these slides really quickly. It may cause your brain.
Don't sit in the dark and watch. And so profit flywheel, best time to, again, just housekeeping here, almost daily in the community. If you bought the book on customersforlife.com, I do this 3 to 4 times a week. Mondays and Fridays are always here with this format with Dan. You can go to cfeclass.com/next. You can also go to profitflywheel.com. It'll take you to the same place. And what will happen is you get the replays of all of these case studies and frameworks. You also get invited to the live we do every Friday. And we're going to put a ton of cognitive horsepower into the Fridays moving forward. Dan and I were scheming all weekend, and pretty much all comes down to we got to help a whole bunch of people on these Fridays for this to work out. So cfeclass.com/next. You want to get invited. If you just want to hear my daily ramblings, go buy Earn Customers for Life. It's like $5. And more than likely when you get in there, I'm going to push you back to here anyway. Right. Flywheel process. It is cash flow engineering, which is essentially getting closer to things that matter to you, like improving your profit and making sure that it is getting reallocated to things that matter in a way that makes sense. Customers for Life. You should know what Customers for Life is if you're here today. this is how we increase the revenue for a particular offer. So you want your revenue to be as high as possible for a particular offer. We go customers for life, and then we cash flow engineer to make it as profitable as possible. Right? So we got high revenue, want to make sure we're engineering cash flows so that revenue is going into your pocket or funding your priorities. Revenue multiplication, another part of the flywheel. It's important. I'm going to show you how I use this with our case study. Her name's Nicole. Revenue multiplication would be adding another stream of income, another offer, another business, maybe an acquisition, an investment, something like that. So we should have our core thing, re-engineer the cash flows, install customers for life, and then explore whether we want to add another thing. And of course, get cash now. Things happen. We want to have ACE cards at all times so we could generate cash on demand. Of course, these ACE cards, you have, like any card game, you only have a few. You want to save them for, this might be relational capital. This might be like, you have a celebrity friend. You could ask them one thing and only one thing. Those are the kind of things that are potentially ACE cards. Keep them in your back pocket. But we need to know they exist so that we can deploy them at the appropriate times. So it all makes sense? Just drop in the comments. Let me know. Zooming through this because I want to get into the actual frameworks. Okay, should I do a thing? What thing should I do? This is the question. We talk about, Dan talks about certainty all the time. Am I going to run out of money? But there's also this noise about there are so many things to do. Some people feel the pressure to do something and they really just be better off riding the wave that they're on right now. And some people do need to do something, but there's 4, 5, 6, 7 different options floating around out there. And so ultimately, the whole profit flywheel, the tactical stuff is actually pretty simple once we determine what we need to do. Should I do a thing, and what thing should I do next? And again, it depends on, Dan built a wonderful dashboard that if you fill out all the information, it pretty much tells you what to focus on, what to do. So we did about 100 sales in 24 hours. And the underpinnings of everything, when somebody comes in, what I want to know is I want to get a quick win, always want to get a quick win, and I want to play a really long game. That's not for everybody. Those people just kind of leave my world. The people that want to play long game don't really get along with Dan and I very well if we let them become clients. So here's the questions. What steps do we need to take, and what steps do we need to get our clients to take, and what steps do we need to get our prospects to take? What are the micro steps? And the answer is we don't know yet, but that's always top of mind. We're always thinking what steps do we need in order to validate each new thing? What are we optimizing for? So in this case, that's a cash flow engineering concept. It's baked into everything, profit priorities, all that stuff. What are we optimizing for? And so I'm going to share with you in this case, it is primarily fame and impact. And we know that. It's something that we got out on our call, say, hey, what are we optimizing for? And it's 3 books, has 3 books already in mind, a mobile app that is already built, and a whole bunch of things that are pretty much fame related, meaning I want a big following and yada, 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 yada. The outstanding issue is actually figuring out how to fund these things. So very similar outside of the fame, very similar to what what we shared is how do we get books written and apps developed and minimize the risk. Difference being Dan doesn't want to be famous, Nicole does. So the steps are a little bit different. Next thing is always audience audit. Do you have an audience? Where are they at? We did a full training, a full worksheet with the full audience audit, all the worksheets and everything. Super, super helpful. I did this with my private clients, and they all most of them had record months after doing the audience audit because they've been so successful on one platform. They never really took the time to figure out how to utilize the others and move people around. So again, I'm just giving you the checklist. This is what happens when somebody comes in. Audience audit. Full training is available. You can just ask for it. It's somewhere in the platinum member area. And then we're always looking at the 4 lenses. and system reliability. System reliability, it's customers for life concept, but it's super important when we're talking about a small business. In this case, we have one influencer and one business partner. So there's two people with really big ambitious goals, which means, and this is really, really important, especially for those that are really good at automations and systems and stuff like that. It means we have to be very, very careful not to create too many components that two people that are not super tech savvy cannot manage it. Right. So system reliability is the idea that the more components you add, the less reliable the system is. Right. Let me know if that makes sense. Because these are the frameworks I use to say, hey, look, this is the way that we have to do it without overwhelming the people involved. Andrew, I got to be careful. Yep. But you also have you have a mind that works really well for that. So it's just important to process these things. Because if we have one component, let's say 90% of the time, I'm going to show up on time and flip the light switch on, and 90% of the time the light switch is going to work, then the reliability of the system is 81%, right? 90% times 90%. Now most technology is like 99.9999999% reliable. But every single time you add a component, especially a human component, it becomes a little bit less reliable, a little bit harder to manage. It's important. You'll see why that's important. Okay. So back to screen here.
Yeah. Can I just throw something in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Move on. So the importance of this systematic process that we go through is that, back to system reliability, is that it's repeatable. And so the importance of that, it should be obvious, but if you solve a problem, and if you're always changing the way that you're solving a problem, you can't compare results. And so then it ends up being, did I get a good outcome because I did something right? Or was it luck, or just right place, right time? Like, what was the real reason why we got the outcome that we got? If we keep changing the methodologies, it's hard to actually answer those questions. What's working, what's not working? So that's why we're all about having a systematic way of assessing and solving problems that's based off data.
You're going to see us talk about the same things over, and the same general concepts just applied to different disciplines or fields over and over. So here's what they came with. And I just, again, the coffee for life is generally more of a conversation, so I'm not going heavy on slides. Huge audience. We're talking about 100,000 Instagram followers. And in the conversations, okay, what have we done so far? And they said I have 40 people on my app. I said, cool. Give me a minute. I spent about 30 minutes trying to figure out how to possibly buy her app. And I couldn't. I could not figure out how to go buy it. So that's piece of data number one for me. So these are things we're looking at. We're always looking at, right, these conversion processes. That's piece of data number one. The second was, okay, what do you do? Because I go live on Instagram every day. There's between 100 and 400 people that stay for the whole time. So we have an engaged audience. Not everybody has that. We'll talk about what we do, because that's, as we're building Dan's app, he doesn't have 100,000 people sitting on his Instagram. So you got all of these people, and somehow you have such like gnarly raving fans that they are finding this link to subscribe to your application that is really, really difficult to find. So the obvious, and this might be even anticlimactic. The obvious first step was like, let's make this easier to buy, because people are accidentally buying it. So we're always looking at like, are there any rogue links or whatever? Like, is there a thing that people are buying that is really, really hard to find? Because there is something about it, whether it be the stealth influence or whatever, that people are like working triple overtime to figure out how to give you money. That happens way more often than you think. You might optimize one process and have no idea that people working 10 times harder like to get into a separate sales process and buying stuff from it. So we want to open those doors. So already I know, okay, people they love you and they're trying to find your stuff. And then we go back to the audience audit process and say, you got all these followers. How do you communicate with them? Right. And go through the audience audit training. It's somewhere in Flywheel. You go to YouTube. It's somewhere on one of these Flywheel Fridays. No email. Never push them to an email, no giveaway, no anything. So already we see there's huge leverage right there in just offering to communicate with them. That's great. That's the easy part. These are the assets. These are the things that are obvious. And then we say, okay, short term, if you're a marketer right now and you're just listening to some of the stuff I'm saying, you probably say, okay, there's hundreds of wins right there. We just retarget all of our traffic, put them into a sales process, right? Hang up number one, we're talking about a 35-year-old woman and her business partner is her mom. Building a sales process is not going to be super easy. It's got to be a no-brainer. We're not going to build a funnel. We're not going to get any copy written. We're not going to do any of that stuff, right? So we start eliminating some of that. And then we say, what's a long-term goal? And the long-term goal is to have this application be like the main thing and fund everything and free her up to write her books. And she has a TV show and all that stuff. Basically, big time influencer status, right? So back to system reliability and back to the main thing. Anything that we do that does not lead to getting a book written or the application built, I want to take off the table immediately. If that's possible, it may not be, right? But if possible, I immediately, so we go to the 4 lenses. Everything we do, it needs to lead to a book or an app. There needs to be a time savings regarding getting to the book or the app, a cost savings, again, regarding getting a book and an app, a forcing function, and if we can, make it a revenue generator. Right? Does that make sense, Dan? Am I missing anything there?
No. Spot on.
So these are, and I'm sharing this because any marketer probably could have taken her audience and spent hours and hours or days and days, put together a sales process, and made 100 sales, but not gotten closer to the thing we want to do. So
maybe I'll plus that a little bit.
Yeah.
On what you just said. So the intention behind the 4 lenses, why we created it to begin with, is 1, the idea that we need to get closer to the things that actually matter. And 2, we want to create what's called asymmetric risk. So I see a lot of new faces in here. And so I think it's important to just introduce people to this concept. There's asymmetric risk to the upside and there's asymmetric risk to the downside. In both instances, it means that, let's just take asymmetric risk to the upside, that the upside is substantially greater than the downside. So if I spend $100, I can lose $100, but my potential return is 10,000. Like the upside is substantially greater than the downside. We can have the opposite as well, where the downside can be substantially greater than the upside. What great entrepreneurs and those that are become super wealthy, what they do is they only make bets, and I consider anything new to be a bet. They only make bets where the upside is substantially greater than the downside. And so what we do with the 4 lenses is that we're eliminating downside. Does that make sense? So worst case scenario, because our criteria is we want to check at least 3 of the 4 boxes. Worst case scenario is that it's not revenue generating, but we had a time savings. Not revenue generating, but it was a forcing function. It caused us to create this content that we were going to do anyways. And so basically we're rigging the game to win. We're setting ourselves up so that even the worst case scenario is a scenario that puts us in a better position than we would have been in had we not done whatever the thing is. So we eliminate things that may seem like good ideas that we can't check multiple of these lenses because it means it's not it likely means it's not an asymmetric risk scenario. So we're just stacking the deck. We're just ensuring that we're going to win no matter what. We might not run up the scores tremendously, but we want to make sure that we still win. A 1-point win is still a win.
Can't lose. That's the game, and I'll share this with you because I'll give you the action steps, and then I'll give you the back and forth that I had with them. The action steps were okay. So, and I'll share my thought process as well. Back to system reliability and the 4 lenses. Now we could build 10 different products with her audience and her intellectual property, no problem. Who has the skill set in our ecosystem right now, meaning them and me, to manage 10 different sales processes and 10 different sets of ads and 10 different, right? Nobody. And so there would be a risk in that we would have to pay somebody to manage all that, hoping that it works, right? So there's a risk involved there. But we still want to build all this stuff. And if the main thing is the app and the book, I said, why don't you, what's your first book? And she told me it's this and this and this. And then these would be the, 3 sections, and each one would have 2 or 3 chapters. I said, cool, line that out. Teach it as a masterclass. Right, same thing that we did with cash flow engineering, same thing I did with Customers for Life. I said, teach it as a masterclass. Because the alternative is you try to make money with this thing over here, whatever you build, and you simultaneously are trying to write this book. That's a lot. Or we can make writing this book this thing you're trying to sell. Even if it doesn't sell, you write the freaking book. Now we know it's going to sell because she has an audience. Right, that's the advantage that she comes to the table with, is a massively engaged audience. The worst thing we could do is send that audience in 15 different directions trying to build 23 different products. So that's step 1. Teach us as a masterclass, line it out like chapters of your book, send the transcriptions out, get the transcriptions back, and write your book from that. And you're going to get paid really well to do that, which is nice. It's nice to get paid to write a book.
Yeah,
okay.
Class on that, masterclass equals webinar or a product. What we're talking about is, I assume what you're talking about is you sold this class, which is 6 to 8 weeks, something like that, based off her outline of her book. And so people are now paying, she's now generating revenue is that right, Nick?
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because I'll share a little bit further too. The application is really, it's similar to what I used to do. It's fitness based, but it's really cognitive behavior therapy. So we need a whole bunch of videos that are training people. If this, then this is how you track it. So this masterclass is actually going to be the videos that go into the app, and the transcripts will become the book. So it's a full product. Like it could be a $4,000 masterclass. It's interactive. And Andrew, you haven't been on some of our calls, so I'll share this with you. We like to do master classes, especially with people that are innovative and have really, really high level stuff like Dan, because this kind of interaction, unlike a one-off live webinar, allows for 6 weeks of dialogue, which allows us to reinvent the message. Just like this, when I say masterclass, it never occurred to me that you might think it's a webinar. Right. So by having this interaction, I can, if I was to turn around and productize this, I would make it clear that I mean masterclass, not webinar. So we teach a masterclass format generally to allow for the reinvention. And we're going to bring our audience up a little bit, and we're going to have to bring our language down a little bit and try to get a place where we're still innovative in the sense that it's not just recycled stuff, but it's not so innovative it's confusing. So that's what I told her to do.
Let me do a quick screen share.
Yeah.
You're the host, so if you want to make me back the host, I'll do a quick.
Yep. And so I'll tell you how this all comes together in a huge, huge, huge win, tying together all those underpinnings.
You see my screen? Okay.
Yep. I almost asked you for that for my slides.
Yeah. So this is what we do. So this is specific to Nick and myself, but so we have this thing, Wealth Q&A, which is a suite of digital products. We do daily calls. One day we cover cash flow engineering. One day we just answer whatever questions people have, business in general. Another day we teach revenue multiplication, and so on and so forth, whatever new thing we're trying to codify. And so this all works together because the topics that are covered in the Q&A are also the outline to the book. And so when we cover it and we talk and we get feedback real time, we're basically pushing that all to transcriptions. And then that goes into like the next chapter of the book. And it's easier to start from 80% or 70% and edit than to try to just sit there and write it out. Then it also feeds into an app. In this case, we have something called the Certainty app. And so by doing this Q&A, we're writing the book. We're also getting the content for the Certainty app. And each thing then references the other thing. So the book references back to the Q&A, the app references back to the Q&A, so on and so forth. And so it's this kind of closed loop system where everything is feeding each other. And so built into this is hedging all of our risks. So we're getting paid to do the Q&A. Q&A is then allowing us to generate more traffic because we take that money, we invest it back in generating a bigger audience. It also then is part of that money is going to pay for ghostwriters, editors for the book, and pay for the development of the app. And so this is an example of how the four lenses basically works together so that no matter what, we're going to win because we are creating products and getting paid for it. So we're not operating at a loss.
Yep. Essentially.
Same thing you're doing with Nicole.
Yep. Essentially getting paid instead of going out of pocket for the book and the app and the time. Because you pay for somebody to build an app and a book, then it's like this lag time where nothing's happening. Maybe marketing and stuff, which costs money. Instead of saying, hey, here, let's pay for the app, let's pay for the book. Let's do our best to make content we think people will like. We just kind of invert it and say, hey, let's get paid to develop the book and the app. And during the whole time, like this down period right now where there is no book or app, which the app is almost done. We're creating goodwill, we're educating people, we're doing all the marketing, and we're getting paid to do the marketing even. So it's worst case.
We'll often have folks who want to be influencers who say, I want to go build out this YouTube channel and all of this content. I'm going to pay someone or some team, some monthly retainer. And then 6 to 9 months from now, I think it's going to generate revenue. That's only one of the four lenses. Our criteria wouldn't allow us to do that venture. So then we figure out, well, how do we rig this so that we can make it a forcing function? We can make it a time savings. We can make it an expense savings. What else can we add to this to ensure that we didn't just spend 6 months, 9 months building a thing that turns out doesn't generate any revenue. And now we're in some shame spiral because we told everybody how we're building this awesome thing and then it was crickets.
Yep, and then I think we'll talk about that Friday. I have on my list to hit micro steps, which we can really break down how we determine because this is part of. I'll go back to what I told them to do here is let's do a masterclass. Now they have no Stripe, they have no payment processor thing. They collect payments through Vimeo, which is where her app is hosted. And so again, we say, all right, what's the priority here? Is it really this masterclass, or are we just using this masterclass to write the book, get the content for the app, and get subscribers, right? And the answer is the latter. Like, let's do long-term here. So we're not even going to build, so don't even build a masterclass. Don't put it in modules. Don't set up a separate payment processor. You would make more money if we did this, if we charge for the masterclass independently. But let's do this. Anybody that's a member of my application and pays for the year up front gets free access. That's the only way to get access to this. So we just eliminated a ton of complexity by saying, if you're in a system that we already know how to manage it, we already have payment collection set up, we already have all the retention stuff set up. So that's another place where paths might be different depending on your goals. But it's $600 a pop for a year of the app. And we got 100-something people to pay for it. So it's not like we're worse off, right? But the important thing is now we don't have to add expenses or complication to manage a separate sales process, a separate payment processor, email automations and all that stuff. So again, it goes back to the profit priorities. Hopefully this makes sense, and system reliability. And like, look, if we can generate 30, 40 grand from zero and not add any complication and get the book written and get the app laid out, that's a pretty big win. So that's the route that we went.
Optimize versus maximize. Maximize would be, we got to make everything perfect today. And that assumes that you have the resources, but you're not a big Fortune 500 company. You don't have the resources. So what's the most efficient path forward?
Yep.
Sell this thing, generate revenue based off the thing we're really trying to do. Then we can go back later and close all the gaps if we want, right? It's like, okay, now we got 60 grand worth of revenue. That's pays for all this stuff. And we have some money left over where we could pay someone to close all the holes.
Yep. So that's exactly the, let's generate it and then we can pay somebody. We don't want to pay somebody and then hope we can generate it. Same best case, much different worst case scenario.
One is not asymmetric risk. We pay someone and to do all this stuff, and then the return is not guaranteed.
Yep. So we just stair step.
Yep. So just invert it.
So then what we said is, all right, so now we got people in the app, which is the main thing anyway. What we want to optimize is the app. That was determined in the beginning, is the application and the book. And if we sell another thing, the incentive is also not aligned. Because one, let's say we sold the masterclass for $300, which was something on the table. We would then have to really focus on this experience to sell them again into the app, which is just too much. It's too many moving parts for the people we have on board, and we're not going to hire people and pray to God it works. Right. So I think we'll sell 200, 250 by the time the class launches. So that's not a small amount of, it's 120 grand. And we're getting the outline for the first book done. And we're generating the revenue so that if she chooses, we can go back in, plug all the holes, have somebody else run that particular thing if it's generating money like that. And then the next thing is how many people on a live class, because she's done live classes before, never paid, but just to indoctrinate audience and stuff. I said anything over 50. So we're using the existing framework, all that stuff. And the next question is, can we monetize them? What about the people that are already on the app? I say, hey, look, if you're part of the app, join the masterclass. Like, should we do a one-time payment? Like, how can we monetize them further? And this is where I said, okay, how many people can you do at once? She said 50. 50 is really, really comfortable, but beyond that, it's going to be really hard to do all the Q&A. He said, cool. Anybody that's already on the app, if they upgrade for another year, they get VIP access. They're the only ones that get one-on-one questions at the end. No extra systems involved. They just have to commit to another year in the thing they're already in. And so we're just eliminating as much complexity as possible. Does that make sense to everybody watching?
Yep. Reward your true fans.
Yep. Because that's a long play, right? We're talking about celebrity brand. Way more important to reward your true friends than to make an extra $17 to let them into a masterclass or something. Right. So just understanding these components as we're sorting through this. And then I'll give you the action steps, how I made the sales, and then we'll do some Q&A because there's a lot of micro steps in here that are really, really important. And just a few tweaks will be the difference between a ton of people rolling in and not so many. I think we need to dedicate a whole hour to that though. So Friday, come to Flywheel Friday, and we'll talk about the micro steps specifically. So here's what we did. We got a vanity URL. Like I said, it's really hard to buy her stuff. I tried. I couldn't figure out how to do it. Somehow people are still figuring it out. So the assumption is if you make it easier, all those other people that couldn't figure it out will go do it. So we just got a vanity URL, really easy to spell, really easy to say, impossible to misspell, and it just went straight to a wait list. Even though we knew we wanted to create, hey, I'm gonna do a masterclass. It's going to be pretty expensive, but if you want to know about it, get on this wait list. Name, phone number, email. Now, due to her, this is all data for me. This is all part of the micro steps. So name and email are required, phone number is not. Because of her relationship with her audience, like I want to say 95% of the people entered their actual phone number. There's a lot of trust. She's clearly never spammed them. Like that signals to me that we should handle the next step a little bit differently. Right. And those are the micro steps I think we'll talk about in upcoming calls. So we threw up a wait list. Get on the wait list. As soon as I have information, I'll let you know when we're going to start. And then I'm looking at it now. Thank you page says, thank you so much. I don't know what I'm going to charge for this because I'm going to put a lot into it. But I tell you what, before I make the offer, if you are in my my membership, my subscription, my app, which is $60 a month, $600 a year, and you pick the yearly option, I'll just throw it in for free. And that's it. We don't even know, I haven't even listed out, the next iteration will be listing out what's in the masterclass. But people are still rolling in because we took the time to understand how simple can we make this based on it'd be really easy to complicate this if we were trying to maximize revenue in the short term. We'd have tripwire funnels and maybe set up some, weird video ad stuff and then some static ads and some banner. It'd be really, really easy to complicate this if we were optimizing for maximum possible revenue from this particular thing. As we went through the lenses, because we use these frameworks, it's really, really simple. Now, here's what we use to our advantage. We know this series of micro steps, and we also know that there's like a decision tree. If only 30 people enroll, it doesn't make any sense to offer VIP access to a certain number. If 150 people enroll and you can only serve 50 at a high level one-on-one, well then it's an ethical move there to say, hey, I got 150 people. I can only do 50. I can only guarantee 50 Q&As. So you can be, here's a link to be a VIP seat because I want to make sure that if you have dying questions that you are prioritized. Right? So there's a series of micro steps and each one depends on the previous step. Like what was the result of the previous step? And if you sort those out, it's incredible. It seems complicated, but what we built is incredibly simple compared to what most people are building.
And you had this call Friday at like 4 p.m.
Yeah.
So from Friday at 4 p.m. to Sunday, you made 100 sales.
I had no idea who this person was on Thursday.
No funnels, no. This was all series of micro steps. If you guys aren't familiar with our concept of micro steps, it's basically gathering data, incremental piece of data to figure out where they're at, essentially on the diffusion of innovation curve, figure out who our true fans are. And so we have that data, then we can easily rig the game to win because we know what their buying behaviors will be. So then
here's the mistake I think most people will make is they'll say, and this happens, they call it the Nick multiplier in mastery mode. My metrics don't make any sense. So for a book funnel, I sold like 6 books yesterday. And it was like 750 in collected revenue, which has been very, very, that's been consistent with both of our stuff, really, is lower volume, but lifetime value is unusually high all the time. And the reason is we build with micro steps. We don't make assumptions. I mean, we don't build a funnel and go, okay, so 10% should hit this, and then 2% should hit this, and then tweak the funnel until that happens. I'll build a landing page and figure out how many people, make the phone number optional to figure out how many people give me their phone number. That tells me something about what the next page should probably say. And again, that's just the micro step process and saying like, let's not build a thing and try to determine and try to guess how people are going to act, and then try to like force them to act a certain way, like shove them down this funnel. Uh, let's put a thing up and see how people actually act.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
let's just,
CFE, cash flow engineering, we talk about this preponderance of data. So it goes back to our principle that essentially we don't speculate on the future. And it can be really annoying to other folks because they don't necessarily have an expectation. What do you mean you don't have an expectation? Well, we don't have any data yet to have an expectation. I have a speculation. There's a difference between speculation and expectation. So effectively, we're going to collect a bunch of data and then rig the game to win, basically. Use that data to determine the next. We've already mapped out what the steps are based off how people react. So if they do X, then we know the next step is Y.
yep. Great example. You use it all the time. Financial literacy for kids, right?
Yeah.
It would have been, and I'll let you break down what we did, but it would have been really easy because Dan had an idea. We put it out there. Everybody loved it. It would have been really easy to build the whole entire funnel, sales process and everything, and then just bang our heads up against the wall trying to make all of the conversion fit within, acceptable KPIs or whatever. But the reality is everybody said they wanted it, and based on their behaviors throughout the process, people just weren't ready to buy it. And it would have been really easy to lose a lot of time and money just trying to, force them through this funnel because we've, as Dan would say, we've named the puppy on what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I can break that down. So right around when COVID-19 happened and schools are starting to shut down, and I live in Seattle, so I think we were one of the first we had the first wave of deaths, unfortunately. And so things moved pretty quickly in terms of things shutting down. And I saw that my kids would be home for an indeterminate amount of time, no school, no daycare. So I thought, okay, well, we're going to have to augment their teaching with something. So what if I put together some financial literacy thing for them and like essentially teach them how to start their own business? So it was something I wanted to do. And so I start going through the four lenses and I go, okay, well, if I commit to this, it would be a forcing function, but I can't necessarily check anything else beyond that. There's no time savings because it's not something I'm already doing, and it's not something I can use elsewhere in my existing businesses. There's no cost savings, and I can't rely on any revenue generation. But it's something I'm interested in doing, and I think it'd be fun for my kids. So we put it out there, and within 2 or 3 days, we had 1,000 people plus add their name to a wait list. And so we took this micro step, which was basically step one: would anybody be interested in this thing? A bunch of people said we'd be interested. Okay, since a bunch of people said they're interested, here's a wait list. So we didn't even build the wait list thing until we got a bunch of people that said they'd be interested. And our criteria going into was at least 50 people need to say that they're interested before we're going to build any sort of opt-in. So we got 50 plus people, we build the opt-in, put them on the wait list. Then we decided we need at least 30 sales within the first 24 hours if we're going to actually do this. So over the course of the next few days, the wait lists went close to 1,000. We make the offer, 0 people bought it. So we were just done at that point. Didn't do anything else other than invite people on that list. We said, hey, there's not enough interest to proceed. We're going to hold off. If you're interested in other financial literacy stuff, here's our other programs. And so then we gave them the option to participate in the other trainings and stuff that we were doing. But the micro steps allowed us to limit our time to, under an hour. Mm-hmm. There was another hour or two where we went kind of back and forth in terms of figuring out the strategy. But we could have easily built the whole thing out because of the number of people who said they were interested and then had 0 sales and have named the puppy. So because we built all this stuff out, now we're going to spend all this time trying to actually make sales. But we knew, because we were building some other stuff, app, book, Q&A, other products, that if we launch this financial literacy thing, is it going to take us away from the things we're already doing and the opportunity cost of being redirected away? So we just use the micro steps to validate and have some predetermined criteria. And so each step then would validate proceeding or not. And if not, then we just move on. But the importance is that we'd already mapped it out in advance. Otherwise, you get caught up in, 1,000 people signed up. People vote with their money. So until they say they're interested, but until they actually vote with their money, you don't really know.
There's a case to be made, which we do in all of our courses, cash flow engineering, revenue multiplication, is having these decision charts mapped out before you get into it. It's kind of like, like a relationship. It's almost like, man, if you know for a fact, if this happens again, I have to get out of this relationship, and you don't negotiate with yourself, you can make good decisions. But when you're in it, it's like, man, okay, I said it was the last time, but I'll give it one more shot, and I'll give it one more shot. And like, you just get down that, you go down that rabbit hole. It's,
when I put together the whole recession-proof thing last year, 12 months ago, when everyone told me I was an idiot for talking about any sort of recession, I said, no, it's not just about, I'm not predicting a recession. I'm just saying, in general, this is business strategy things you should do. One of the core tenets was build out your plus minus list. What are the things you're going to buy when they go on discount? What are the things you're going to get rid of first? And if you're pretty matter of fact about the things you're going to get rid of right away, then that sort of begs the question, can you just get rid of it now? Like if you had an employee who are like, if things go sideways, I'm going to fire this person immediately. Like, you're like, okay, is there something more here? Do you not like this person? Like, is there some issue right now that you want to deal with? But it's prescribing, when X happens, I'm going to do Y. I know when something goes on discount, I'm going to gobble it up, or I'm going to, this is going to be the first thing that we're going to cut. It's the same exact. So when you have a framework, you just can apply it to everything. We have a plus minus list. Well, we apply the same thing to how we launch products. We apply the same thing to every aspect of our business. How can we prescribe what the outcomes are so that we're not having to wrangle with ourselves?
Yep, that's the magic. There's something powerful about being able to make these decisions in real time. And so going back, and again, so Ian Stanley just hopped on, so I'll send him a replay. Going back, the way we build this is, and didn't get into it because it's in the revenue multiplication class, is by understanding where her audience is on the diffusion of innovation curve, so that a live masterclass actually makes sense. A live masterclass doesn't always make sense. What we've done now is generated $120,000. It's about 60 or 70 now, but we haven't done any sales, like any sales push at all. It was legitimately using these micro steps and then opening the door and seeing what happens. 100 people roll in with no sales pitch at all. So now we got the revenue, we got the app subscribers, and we have the framework to outline the book. And we're going to hopefully deliver. She'll deliver really well. She always does. That creates more concentric growth. So there is no way to lose. Very worst case, even if we sold 5, we got 5 people on, and it's like, woo, five people, $3,000. It would still be the forcing function, the time savings, and the cost savings, because this is stuff that she had to make anyway. So instead of launching this thing over here and trying to find time to build this, we launched this thing to build this, and it serves the big picture. Now, what that allows us to do is, this conversation I had with her business partner, who's far more detail oriented, and she comes from corporate. She's a C-suite at IBM, which they're more used to maximize mindset, right? What we had to do was just help understand the resource allocation. It's really, really important. We could spend 2 hours doing this side project over here. But if the long game is book application and book and attention, then 2 hours spent over here. The question is, do we spend 2 hours over here to make a couple extra bucks, or do we spend 2 hours pushing them in to the main thing? Which one is going to serve us better? Generally speaking, 2 hours pushing it to the main thing because we have limited resources. So it's important, again, all the frameworks I shared, which I'll share again, and why I led with the like audience audit and the system reliability and these things that might seem like, okay, but how do I sell stuff? It's actually really, really beneficial to know these things so that you can sell stuff like a freaking maniac and not have to worry about the system reliability component. There are absolutely scenarios where you sell like a maniac, and that short-term exploitation play hurts the long-term vision. And sometimes we realize that, and there's like this dissonance, and then we just can't. There's a hesitance to sell. So hopefully that made sense. Micro steps. That's really. I'll break down the micro steps and what I'm looking at. Actually, Ian has just told me he's building up a bunch of follow-up. So I'll either talk to him privately or Ian come to Friday. I'll break down what we're looking at because the biggest reason none of the other stuff that she was doing was working was, one, it's really hard to go find that freaking thing and buy it. Two, a little bit of not lack of conviction, but not clarity on how this serves the big picture, which we provided. And the third being, we talk to them differently. Understanding how she is perceived and that her audience by and large is in the early adopter innovator stage of diffusion, we can create an internal buying pressure. And that internal buying pressure at this stage, it won't be, if that masterclass gets turned into a course as mass market, it'll be a different internal buying pressure. But at this particular stage, all I've had her do over the last day to generate hundreds of sales, like 108, I think is where it's at right now, in less than 24 hours. Because she started at 1, so it's been 22 hours, is change the talk track to create internal buying pressure. By the way, I'm going to talk about this with the people in my masterclass on Monday, one-on-one. By the way, I just had I just had a group meeting with my masterclass members, and they said XYZ that made me feel so good. And the internal buying pressure is like FOMO, because I belong with those people. And you can do that with the innovators and the early adopters. They don't necessarily need to know the details, and they're not so worried about the safety credibility that the mass market is. They just want access to the person they consider the expert. And so we created internal buying pressure at every step. The steps we're using now will not work for mass market. You have to know who she is. You have to know her language, and that will evolve.
Built that whole thing out in revenue multiplication about how you move across the diffusion of innovation curve and determine essentially what your message effectively has to be given where you're at. So folks who are innovators or early adopters have different things they're looking for than mid-market or mid to late adopter. So that's 60 plus years of research, academic articles that support all that. Andrew asks, so for a masterclass, could you just rebrand a weekly group coaching call as a masterclass? That's what we did. That's what Nick and I did. So I had essentially a weekly Q&A, and I decided it initially started with, I'm going to build an app, and how do I go about getting an audience around it? So I started a weekly group call so I could just validate really what people were interested in. And then at some point I had to figure it out, like what's going to go into the app V1, and that a book related to it made sense without getting into all the details. So then we taught cash flow engineering, and we gave everybody who was already a part of the weekly group call access to it. Hey, you get because you bought into it, you're going to get access to this new class, like as an appreciation for you joining.
I want to point out again, revenue. Think about the long-term goal. If you're not exploiting, which means you want to play a long game, I will almost always forego the short-term cash infusion of charging them again and reward and train them that, hey, look, I have people that email me like, I don't know what I just bought, but every time I buy something, it gets more and more and more valuable. Mm-hmm. And that will be more valuable to your brand than making a few extra sales. So just to piggyback off what Dan was saying, I'm a huge fan of grandfathering early adopters in as a thank you, because they will buy so much stuff later on because they've been trained that when they buy stuff, it actually becomes more valuable over time.
Yeah, and there's an additional, the goodwill is super valuable, and it feeds your true fans. And also you're guaranteeing that there will be attendance in this masterclass. So you sort of are ensuring that when you teach the class, there's going to be people there who are going to ask questions. And so when new people are showing up, they're like, hey, I'm not the only one here. Mm-hmm. I feel validated. That post-purchase dissonance, you buy and then you have the regret afterwards. Should I have really bought this? Again, there's years and years of research on post-purchase dissonance, the anxiety afterwards. When there's a community, especially if they're in the middle of the diffusion curve and later, they want to know that they're not the only one. So you're feeding that confidence to the new people that, hey, this was a good idea. I've got other people there. Go ahead, man.
So you could take, and Dan and I geek out on this stuff. You could take your early adopters, innovators, say, hey, I'm going to give you this for free. I just did this and it worked really well. I'm going to give you this for free, but here's what I want you to do for me. And I just linked them to an ad for Customers for Life. I said, go to this video and just share your thoughts and I'll give you access to this for free, which I was going to give anyway. And what that does, that helps us push us along the diffusion curve, because the further to the right you go, the more mass market, the more they need social proof. Right? So we can take our early adopters and innovators that don't need social proof. They just want to trust you. And we could use them to push, which is, to me, is more valuable than getting a few extra bucks for them. Like capturing more of the market, rigging the game to capture more of the market with your existing audience, wind at your back, is more valuable than getting an extra $100 out of each of them. So those are the things when we talk about strategy. And that's why it's so important in revenue multiplication, why we taught the diffusion of innovations. Because at first it's kind of like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? But as you go along the journey, you go, I have innovators, and I know that the thought leaders here, they just need a little more safety credibility. We could provide that with social proof, which we're going to get from our innovators, and just rig the whole game. So he says, here's what I would do. It's most helpful if you have a long-term plan. So if you have a long-term vision, Andrew, and you say, okay, here's one component of that app. So for Dan, we have like 5 components of this application. Here's one component. I would rebrand your coaching calls, absolutely, to be that, name it. And then that's the theme of all your coaching calls. And then you just line it out, kind of outline what the course or the book or whatever would be. You teach it live, and your biggest fans, your adopters, people that know you like Trish, they're going to join. But you can absolutely use you could use group coaching calls. And I saw on Facebook somebody ask, even if they're free, you can use free. You can use free videos to outline future stuff. You're not going to necessarily get paid on the front end, but you build brand awareness, goodwill, yada, yada, yada. So I'd have no aversions, depending on cash flow situation. I'd have no aversions to teaching an entire masterclass for free publicly, and then having it packaged up into a book or an app and selling that. Like, that's perfectly fine. It's missing that cash flow component on the very front end.
Yeah, got to go back to what you're optimizing towards, and go back to the 4 lenses and see how it all fits together.
And you could, Andrew, again, if it was free, you could do it for free. And at the end of every one, you could still make a call to action to something, another product or something.
Or a micro step.
Yep.
Get them to opt into something.
So we're actually over time. You guys are awesome. Hopefully this was useful. Again, I do coffee for life. Mondays, if there's no PvP updates, I'll probably just do them right here so you guys can join. If you go to cfeclass.com/next or profitflywheel.com, you'll get invited to Friday, where we're going to spend an entire session breaking down micro steps, because that's really where I think you can hedge from a marketing and sales component, non-financial. You can hedge the most. Like, you really eliminate downside by understanding the micro steps and having stop losses.
Yep.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. We'll see you guys. If you're not in our program, then we won't see you till Friday. If you are in a program, see you tomorrow for cash flow engineering.
Yeah. See you tomorrow.